All right, good evening. Let me know if you can hear and see me okay. And we will jump right into it. We have a lot to cover as always. Let me know in the chat room if you can see and hear me okay. Looks like we're doing pretty well. Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Darnell. We have a ton to cover. We are going to be a little bit technical tonight. We're going to talk about, of course, coronavirus. One of our patrons just sent to me just 2 minutes ago a article and some links regarding the H1N1 influenza vaccine. So we're going to get into that. But we're also going to talk about D-Wave, something I haven't mentioned in a long time in detail, but D-Wave quantum computing. We're going to talk about qubits, quantum entanglement, quantum tunneling, but we'll do it briefly because we've covered this many times in the past. But kind of bring up, the new patrons up to speed a little bit on it. But I want to explain what's coming with regard to D-Wave and their latest quantum computer that is due out same time as Libra, sometime in the first half. They're saying perhaps June, but sometime in the first half of this year, the brand new computer from D-Wave with over 5,000 qubits. Right now they're operating at 2,000 qubits. They say it's actually 2,048 qubits. But anyway, we're going to talk about D-Wave quantum computing and how that's relevant to our everyday walk of life. We try to make everything that's technical relevant, so it means something, and you realize just what's going on in the world. But we are also going to talk about Emnity, and we will get into a couple of verses on Emnity, very familiar to all of us that are familiar with Scripture. But we're going to add, again, familiar Scripture, modern context. We're going to feed in some of the technical into the word and discussion of enmity. Okay? Well, let's begin with this, which is the mind of Christ that I was sharing with you here as our thumbnail, 1 Corinthians 2:16. For who has known the mind of the Lord so as to instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ. So let's look at the greater context of this. Spiritual wisdom from the Bible Hub on 1 Corinthians chapter 2, beginning with verse 6. Among the mature, however, we speak a message of wisdom, but not the wisdom of this age or the rulers of this age who are coming to nothing. So we can bear that in mind. To all the people that are out there on the world stage as leaders, as experts, pontificating out there like our President Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, and all the rest that are out there on the world stage today. Even those twits that choose to tear up a speech, completely disrespecting the office of the president. I don't care who's in office. You respect the office. Anyway, the rulers of this age who are coming to nothing. No, we speak of the mysterious and hidden wisdom of God, which he destined for our glory before time began. None of the rulers of this age understood it, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. Rather, as it is written, no eye has seen, no eye has heard, no heart has imagined what God has prepared for those who love him. Now that fits in with what Kathleen often has presented in the live streams, and she's here in the background in the studio tonight and handling the chat room and engaging with all of you guys. And I will be taking questions after about an hour and a half, so have your questions ready. But what God has prepared for those who love him fits into what she has said many times about the changes, the spiritual changes that God's people are undergoing right now through the Holy Spirit. And we will be performing works. As Jesus said in John 14:12-14, we will do things even greater than Jesus Christ. I don't know how to define that. We're not even going there. We're simply putting the word out there, and we're just letting the Lord unfold things for us how he chooses to do, as he will with each of us individually. But let's continue. God has revealed it to us by the Spirit. The Spirit searches all things, even the deep things of God. For who among men knows the thoughts of man except his own spirit within him? So too, no one knows the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God. We have not received the spirit of this world, but the Spirit who is from God, that we may understand what God has freely given us. And this is what we speak, not in words taught us by human wisdom, but in words taught by the Spirit, expressing spiritual truths in spiritual words. The natural man does not accept the things that come from the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness to him, and he cannot understand them, because they are not spiritually discerned. Let me back that up a little bit. Because they are spiritually discerned. So let me read that again. For they are foolishness to him, and he cannot understand them, because they are spiritually discerned. The spiritual man judges all things, but he himself is not subject to anyone's judgment. For who has known the mind of the Lord so as to instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ. We have the mind of Christ through the Holy Spirit. This is why so many of us feel so disconnected from the world and what's going on, and we oftentimes have a sense of bewilderment at the behavior of people around us. I mean, we just go about our daily routines doing things in public, and it's like, what planet are these people on? Well, no, you got to do a 180 there, buddy. You got to say, what planet are you on? I'm talking about myself and the rest of us that are saved. What planet are we on? You see, we're the aliens here. I would venture to say people look at our behavior and they wonder, what planet are these guys, these Christians, from? That's the way it is. We're aliens. We're alienated. We don't understand the ways of the world. We try to break it down. We look at the technology. We talk about it spiritually. But, you know, it's becoming more and more obtuse and more confusing and more quite unbelievable, and especially unbelievable in the sense of how open evil is now, especially in its names of companies, names of businesses, names of systems and products that are straight out of hell itself. And another one of our patrons, just about 30 minutes before we went on the air, sent me something that's going to touch way back into history of things that we've talked about here. Again, as an example of just how open Satan is now. And those that are blindly following him as fools, and I don't use that in a judgmental fashion, I just am saying it's foolishness to not follow God. I think you guys would agree with me. So they behave as a fool, exhibiting foolishness, because only a fool would follow Satan. It goes hand in hand. That's just simple logic. Now, I would like Kathleen to bring up, she'll be off camera, but I would like her to bring up some of our needs for prayer from the group before we get too far into this, because what is most important is the spiritual, not all this technical stuff that I'm going to sprinkle around and, you know, pixie dust for you tonight. It's the spiritual and it's the salvation. But we have people that are hurting, and we are honored by prayer requests, and when you guys update us as to what's going on, and we have a couple of updates we'll do, but I want Kathleen to bring in where prayer is needed. And we're going to start right out with that because it is the most powerful weapons system on the planet, prayer. So go ahead, Kathleen.
Well, I've just told everybody that I'm in my PJs and off camera tonight, so I'm
Swing the camera
just.
around.
And then it was driving me crazy that the lamp was off centered on that table. So my first
Oh.
opportunity, I fixed it.
OCD.
Yeah, that's what they've already been saying.
By the dawn's early light,
So
can you see?
all right.
All right.
So Debbie Deborah in the chat room was sharing with us, some issues that she's contending with right now in terms of pain, and I was very, wanting to encourage her and others that have had taken the opportunity to write us and let us know. And I love the comfort level that we feel within this group, and to be able to share, these things. I've shared some personal things in my life. They've shared personal things in their life. We've had others that have written us with testimonies of healing and in the process of healing, and we are so encouraged by that.
And
So
we've even changed the weather in New South Wales.
Oh, well, I think all of our prayers move the
Let's
hand
go.
of God. So,
Yeah.
so anyway, if there, we know that there are others that might have silent, things that they want to keep to themselves, and we just encourage you that God, He knows our hearts, He knows us intimately. So, I'd just like to pray real quick for everyone here and for this upcoming week and the things that we will face and contend with and be victorious over. So, Lord, we just come to you right now and we lift up our friend, it was either Debbie or Deborah, and you know what she's contending with right now, Father, in terms of her pain, and I think she had said it's an autoimmune issue. And we pray for a miracle in her life, if only because we come to you as a group that focuses on you, on your power, on your plans for the future, on everything that concerns our lives, Lord, every aspect of our lives. And so I thank you for us to be able to come together as a group and honor you and glorify you and to be encouraged and directed by you. And so I pray for each and every person here this week that you will watch over them, grant them traveling mercies as they go to and from their jobs and about their daily lives. I pray that those who are in pain will experience relief through the power of your Holy Spirit because you love us. I pray, Lord God, if there are those in need, financial need, or need of an occupation or a job of some sort, Lord, or their situations at home need to change, I pray that you hear their cries and that you will move, your hand will move to help and assist them to bring peace to their homes, and that they don't have to work harder, Lord. They can work smarter, and you will bring the means for them to be able to have a nice quality of life and not always having to struggle or to, persevere and fight through. And we know that strengthens us in many ways, but sometimes it also exhausts us. So I just pray right now for relief for those who need it, and strength and help. Send help to those who might need assistance, Lord God, if they're caring for parents or having to move, or if they're changing jobs, or even looking for love, Lord. There are people who have shared with us that they would love to have a godly partner, well, not partner, husband or wife, to share their life with. And so we come to you and ask that you hear their cries for this and their heart's desires. And we just thank you for this time together. And I ask you to bless Anthony as he brings this information to our friends, and that you would give them the gift of understanding through the power of your Holy Spirit, as we just read, that you will reveal to our hearts and minds those things, Lord God, that cannot be discerned in the natural, but that we will discern through the power of Ruach HaKodesh, your Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Kathleen. The big K. The special K.
Special.
She's very special.
Very special.
Oh, yeah, she's special. All right.
It's my birthday.
It's your birthday on Wednesday.
I said it's my birthday week.
Oh, birthday week.
Yeah. We're going to celebrate the whole week.
Got to be pretty special if you get a whole week for your birthday.
Yeah.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Okay. One of our patrons, I won't use by name, but starts with a T. TL. Okay, TL. You know who you are. I had asked a couple of weeks ago, just send me the tweets. Send me the tweets, particularly regarding China and the Middle East. So I'm going to take some of those and take a couple of minutes to just scream through some of these, because it'll give you a snapshot of two sides of the world of what's going on. So I'm just going to take them as they came in. So run with me here. I can't pronounce the name. Zhu Wengai, 73rd richest man in China. The Chinese regime has hidden the facts about the coronavirus. More than 50,000 corpses were burned in 49 crematoriums in the province of Hubei alone. The number of people infected with the virus in the country is 1.5 million. That's according to the 73rd richest man in China, tweeting that out 4 hours ago. Okay, we're just going to run through these. Another Turkish army convoy is entering northern Idlib now. Again, 4 hours ago. Coronavirus, death toll surpassing the number of fatalities from 2003 SARS outbreak. Turkish army has given orders to Syrian rebels in northern Idlib and Aleppo to prepare for a military offensive. Quote, the battle will begin very soon. So we're jumping back and forth across the world here, folks. Okay. Okay, we got that one. This is really, this is, I guess, typical in China. It's just, anyway, I'll just read it. The Chinese government turned a university student's apartment into a quarantine space for the coronavirus patients. I think they mean the apartment building itself, okay? Due to the personal belongings left by students during the winter holiday, they just got thrown out the window. It's just no regard. There's no regard for life, much less the personal possessions of people, at least from what we're getting. How do I know? I'm not there. But I think it just tells you the level of how things are there. Okay, this is another tweet. This one's coming out of the Middle East. Hamas clearing posts. So those would be outposts and guard posts and forward positions. Hamas is clearing posts and headquarters in Gaza, expecting IDF strikes. Again, that came in about 4 hours ago. Now here's a different one, different source coming out of Breaking Israel News regarding Turkey. Earthquake in Turkey turns river's blood red. Interesting. Got a few more of these, and then we're going to dive into the technical stuff. This comes out of intellihub.com. WHO director, the Director General, tweets, "We are mobilizing the UN." This came out yesterday. World Health Organizer Director General sent out a tweet on Friday admitting that the United Nations is being mobilized. This means UN troops will rove and police various nations of the world, including the United States. The tweet is, quote, "WHO is not alone. We are mobilizing the full power of the UN system and bringing together partners to support countries to respond to the 2019 novel coronavirus outbreak. I guess we should be watching for blue helmets in the streets of greater downtown USA. Not trying to cause fear, just throwing it out there, throwing it out the headlines here. It's just amazing. Just amazing. The Chinese ambassador to the United States on CBS News' Face the Nation did not deny that the coronavirus came from China's biological warfare program, and instead suggested that the deadly virus could have come from a military lab in the United States. Very interesting. You can extrapolate that one. I am not going to be a sensationalist or a fearmonger. I'm simply just going to put these out there, and you can certainly understand why I'm putting it out there. Turkey is also bringing heavy artillery like the multiple launch rocket system T-122 to Idlib. Over 1,000 vehicles arrived in the past few days, and another convoy entered tonight. That's in Syria. Okay, I think that's got enough of that. Let's see what we have here. Here's one that just came in from one of our patrons. This is from Times of Israel. This just popped into my email as I'm going through them. After rocket fired into Israel, aircraft strike Hamas targets in Gaza. The Israeli Air Force strikes come after Prime Minister, Defense Minister the Prime Minister and the Defense Minister promise harsh military response following a week and a half of near daily attacks from Gaza. Israeli warplanes attacked several targets in the Gaza Strip after midnight on Sunday, the army said. Several hours after terrorists in the enclave launched a rocket into Israel. Again, the source of this is the Times of Israel. Alrighty, so I'm not going to dig into a lot of that. Benjamin Netanyahu all week has been saber-rattling about Hamas and saying, if you guys don't knock this off, and basically what it's been mortars, it's been these balloons full of petroleum that they've been floating over, these fire bombs, and they really aren't doing anything significant in the way of damage from what I can tell. But this is all part of the provocation. This is what Benjamin Netanyahu wants. He wants an excuse to hit Hamas. And we know this. We know that he has even been saying, Benjamin Netanyahu, that he is going to deal with Hamas once and for all before the March 2nd elections. I don't think they're even going to have a March 2nd election. I think this is just wag the dog. President Trump succeeded with his impeachment battle through wag the dog, and now Benjamin Netanyahu is going to shore up his political position by doing much the same. Alrighty. Trying to decide whether we're going to get into the medical or if we're going to get into the D-Wave stuff. I'm going to leave the D-Wave and we're going to get into the medical. I'm not going to cite the patron's name here. I'm just going to read. Oh boy. Licensed on January 31st, same day the U.S. declared a health emergency and turned us over to the global WHO control. She says, I just knew what I was going to find when I looked into this. Squalene, the adjuvant used in the anthrax vaccine that likely caused the Gulf War syndrome. Okay? And she says they hid it under MF59. This is really, really not good news, and she's a healthcare professional. I'm going to give you a little background here, just to kind of help out. I'm going to read from a couple of sources here. This is from vaccinechoicecanada.com. They are anti-vaccines, so you'll understand the slant here. I'm going to read this to you. We know that squalene, added to boost immune response in a formulation known as MF59, is the secret ingredient in certain lots of experimental anthrax vaccine that has caused devastating autoimmune diseases and death in countless Gulf War vets. Canadian, British, and Australian troops were also injected with squalene-laced vaccine and continues to be used today. There is a, quote, close match between the squalene-induced diseases in animals and those observed in humans injected with this oil, such as rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, and systemic lupus erythematosus, writes Matsumoto, one of the researchers quoted in this article. These three illnesses have been proven to be caused by this oil. They're talking about squalene. But there is an additional long list of autoimmune diseases associated with squalene injected into humans. Now, he's being quoted here. There are now data in more than 24 peer-reviewed scientific papers from 10 different laboratories in the US, Europe, Asia, and Australia, documenting that squalene-based adjuvants can induce autoimmune diseases in animals, observed in mice, rats, guinea pigs, and rabbits. Sweden's Karolinska Institute has demonstrated that squalene alone can induce the animal version of rheumatoid arthritis. The Polish Academy of Sciences has shown that in animals, squalene also can produce catastrophic injury to the nervous system and the brain. And I'll kind of jump through this. What we're talking about here is squalene being included in a new vaccine, and I'm going to pull that open here real quick. This is for influenza A, H5N1 vaccine. This comes out of Medscape. The H5N1 influenza or avian flu immunization. This is where this adjuvant is being utilized. Just pulling open a couple of sources here. The name of this, the trade name, is AUDENZ. I assume that is odd ends, perhaps odd ends. New pandemic influenza vaccine uses next generation technology to strengthen health security. On January 31st of 2020, we achieved a major milestone in pandemic influenza preparedness. This is coming out of phe.gov. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration's licensure of odd ends, the first adjuvanted cell-based influenza vaccine designed to protect our nation from the H5N1 avian flu virus. This has been developed by Securus with support from the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, otherwise known as BARDA, within the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, will be produced at a facility in Holly Springs, North Carolina, to help ensure the vaccine will be available to the American people when they need it most. Again, this was written January 31st of this year, folks. Modernizing influenza vaccines and domestic manufacturing capacity is a priority for the Trump administration and critical for national health security. Last live stream, you guys were talking about an executive order signed by the president regarding vaccines in September. On September 19th, 2019, the president issued an executive order that set a clear direction for the next generation of pandemic influenza vaccines. The nation needs more modern, domestically manufactured vaccines that can be produced without relying solely on egg-based processes. Odd Ends uses two leading-edge technologies. One, an antigen-sparing adjuvant and cell-based vaccine technology that represent a game-changing advance in the state of pandemic influenza preparedness. Now they go on to talk about the background of using chicken eggs to develop vaccines. I think most of you are familiar with that. I'll skip on past that. Odd Ends uses cell-based vaccine technology. When they say cell-based, okay, they're talking about living cells. The adjuvant is used to penetrate the wall of the cell. It also is used to stimulate, in other words, hyperstimulate the immune system. When you hyperstimulate the immune system, what you're doing is you are causing it to produce, I would call it a violent reaction against a specific disease, okay? So that's what squalene is used for, is to allow penetration of the cell walls. That speeds up the reaction. That speeds up, if you will, the effectiveness of the vaccine. So cell-based vaccine technology and an adjuvant, which boosts the body's immune response and makes the vaccine more effective overall. In the early days of a pandemic, the amount of vaccine that can be manufactured is limited by the amount of antigen, the part of a vaccine that arms the immune system. Okay, that's what the antigen is. That can be produced. However, the adjuvant used in Odd Ends reduces the amount of antigen needed for the vaccine. By using this antigen-sparing technology, more doses of Odd Ends can be made from the same amount of antigen while maintaining the safety and effectiveness of the vaccine. Again, this is coming from phe.gov, so you understand their perspective. Ultimately, that means more vaccine is available in a given period of time. Okay, skip through this. The first time I read this particular link that she sent to me, but I'm just scanning it quickly. Okay, so the overall here is that they claim that this new vaccine, because it has an adjuvant that will allow it to penetrate the cell wall more quickly, they don't need as much of the antigen, which is the original virus that is reduced in its potency. In the past, they would use reduced potency diseases or the dead virus or bacteria in order to make a vaccine. Now what they're doing is they're actually using cells, live cells of the influenza, but they're making the cell wall more permeable, so they don't need as much of that material to create a vaccine. That's the takeaway from this. Let me check her other links that she sent. That was the same, yeah. So isn't that interesting? September 19th of 2019, that the president signed an executive order for new generation pandemic influenza vaccines, and then a few months later we're dealing with coronavirus. There are no coincidences in life. There are none. Okay. All right, I won't get into this too much because this is another link that she sent to me. Vaccine A, the covert government experiment that's killing our soldiers and why GIs are only the first victims. This is a book that was written, authored by Gary Matsumoto. Vaccine A is the title of it. Many new vaccines feature recombinant DNA. I mentioned that in the last live stream. Recombinant DNA means that they're manipulating the genome sequence. Okay? One piece of a deadly germ is inserted or spliced into other organisms, creating bioengineered microbial molecules. To prompt the body to create antibodies to these recombinants, scientists have created deadly oil-based vaccine additives called adjuvants. Oil-based adjuvants cause extreme inflammation, and animals injected with them always develop painful, incurable autoimmune diseases like multiple sclerosis, etc. Okay? So I'm going to skip through a lot of this, but squalene is the number one that the military has been using as an adjuvant to enhance the effectiveness of the vaccines. All right. The Bush administration is funding development, so this is a little bit dated. The Bush administration is funding development of new biowarfare vaccines that will also contain oil-based squalene adjuvants like MF59 or MPL. Because federal officials know that these vaccines may cause disability or death, legislation to protect vaccine makers from lawsuits is expected to be passed by Congress before the end of 2005. So we know that that already was passed. The pharmaceutical agencies have absolutely no liability anymore in the products that they are producing. And that's been the case for many years now. So they're just pushing this on us, and we really don't have any say in this. And we have the president issuing an executive order. I mean, he's effectively acting as a dictator. We don't have a choice in any of this. So something that I mentioned at the beginning here I'd like to get into, and that is Emnity. And my lovely wife Kathleen was the one that brought this to my attention this evening because it really speaks to the bigger picture of what's going on here. We've got the vaccines, we've got the coronavirus, we've got the Middle East issues going on. We have some of the technology I'm going to share with you happening. But this represents this word enmity. Remember Satan in the Garden of Eden talking about this. Enmity and the seed. And as we so often do here, we not only define words, but we place those words into a more modern context in our discussion. We take a different interpretation based upon what we know that's going on today in the world of some of the more familiar words from Scripture. Okay? Let's look at the word seed, as in random seed. A random seed, and we're going to get a little technical here, but we're looking at things differently. We're looking at it from the technical, the scientific, the quantum mechanical perspective that we've been sharing with you. A random seed is a number used to initialize pseudo-random number generators. To take you back a little bit, we've talked about random number generation in the context of quantum computing. We've also spoken about the connection between quantum computing and the ancient form of random number generation, a divinatory process known as geomancy. Within the greater group of mantic arts, which they themselves, the mantic arts, are divinatory processes based upon random number generation. Quantum computers are man's best mechanism for generating random numbers. And why is that such a big deal? Well, random numbers that are produced by a quantum computer are produced for the purpose of predicting the future. If you can predict the future, then that is the most valuable commodity on the planet. In other words, quantum computers are used as a divinatory tool to divine the future. Nothing new under the sun. Again, going back a little bit just to bring new patrons up to speed here. For a seed to be used in a pseudo-random number generator, it does not need to be random. Because of the nature of number generating algorithms, that means including AI, AI is used in generating numbers randomly because AI is built around recognizing embedded patterns that humans otherwise would not recognize, okay? Because of the nature of number generating algorithms, so long as the original seed is ignored, okay, that's the pseudo portion of this. The original seed is not random, it's not a random number, but that number is used to start the process of generating random numbers. That's what a pseudo-random number is. It's something that is produced by a non-random number, okay? The rest of the values that the algorithm generates will follow probability distribution in a pseudo-random manner. Now, let's go to 40,000 feet. I'll back out of this a little bit and we'll come back to it. When we are talking about pattern recognition, the tip of the pyramid, and I'm using that on purpose, the tip of the pyramid, or if you want to call it the tip of the spear or the tip of the iceberg, the finer point on random number generation is to predict the future. Why random numbers? Because this is the process, the magical process, the age-old, thousands of years back to 3500 BC process of connecting our physical world to the spiritual world. Because the basis of this divination process is that the human, the unskilled, produces a pattern randomly, dots in the sand, which is geomancy. And we're going to show you something from a business corporation, modern day, just sent to me before the live stream. Modern day corporate logo and geomancy side by side. But focusing here on random numbers that are produced by a human, let's say in the sand with geomancy. It can be cards, it can be sticks, drawing lots, rolling dice, looking at the pattern of birds flying in the sky. Anything that produces random patterns, human or by nature, but primarily in divination, it is based upon humans generating the random patterns, the random numbers, dots in the sand. The connection of that physical human to the spiritual, according to the mantic arts, is that now a deity, a demon, a god, an angel, a spiritual entity, has a spiritual influence over that human while that human was generating what appears to humans as a random pattern of numbers. Okay? The supposition, the assumption by diviners, alchemists, spiritualists, tarot card readers, whatever. The assumption is that this practice of connecting a human to a spirit or multiple spirits is a pre-existing connection that influences humans from the spiritual side. We've always said here, you cannot separate the physical from the spiritual. This is what we're giving another example of here. Random number generation, pseudo-random number generation, quantum computers generating random numbers. What does it mean to us? Why is it even relevant? We don't practice geomancy. We don't practice the mantic art, so why is it relevant? Those that are running the world practice it, meaning humans that are in charge, steeped in geomancy and the other mantic arts. Nothing's changed from the time of Daniel. Therefore, they impact our lives. There are people beneath the leadership level that likewise are involved in this and affect our lives. People who build out technology, many of them are involved in this, knowingly and unknowingly. Okay? So this connection to ancient divinatory practices still exists today. You've heard me talk for many years about D-Wave's quantum computers. This is a geomantic device, just like rolling dice, just like making dots in the sand. Plain and simple. You can look at all the white papers you want. You can talk to all the computer scientists and engineers you want. You can look into the deep technical stuff on qubits and quantum entanglement and tunneling from high energy states to low energy states and quantum annealing as it's known. And I'll get into a little of that in a little bit. But what it all comes down to is what my wife taught me. You know, I get into all this, highbrow kind of, white papers. Let's talk qubits. It all comes down to what my wife taught me. She doesn't practice the mantic arts. We sort of co-discovered, but I'd never heard of geomancy. I'd heard of other mantic arts like spatulamancy and aeromancy and aquamancy, but I'd never heard of geomancy until she found it and brought it to me. But geomancy is exactly what a D-Wave quantum computer performs. Random dots, random number generation. To infinity, as Buzz Lightyear would say. To infinity, random numbers. And going back many months, I defined what's the difference between a random number and a finite number. How do you define a random number? Well, you'd have to even go talk to Plato and Aristotle to understand that conversation and that debate. But without getting into the weeds of philosophy, as I've done in the past, let's stay on point. And that is the spiritual connection to the physical world, influencing the physical world, influencing, yes, the elements of the world, air, water, fire, and the soil. Look at New South Wales. No doubt the fallen angel governors were involved in the drought and the fires and now the floods in New South Wales. And we'll just keep praying against those governors of the fallen angels.
Otherwise known as powers and principalities.
The powers and principalities in the air, absolutely.
Can I just make
go ahead.
About what you were saying? I had an interesting conversation. I work for a Greek Orthodox seminary, School of Theology, liberal arts college in Boston, and they have a lot of Greek scholars, that have taught at Harvard and taught all over the world.
Speak up a little.
And I had mentioned I had been involved in a conversation with one of these gentlemen, and I had said to him straight out, I said, you know, I know what Jesus wrote in the sand. And he looked at me and he said, oh, you do? I said, yes. I said, he was speaking to them in a language that the Pharisees and Sadducees understood. I said, a process that they use to arrive at answers to questions. I said, it's called geomancy. And his mouth nearly dropped. His mouth nearly dropped.
He was an academic.
And he said to me, and he teaches in Israel. He goes over to Israel quite a bit to teach, and over in Thessaloniki. And he said, well, you know, that was very common back then. I said, oh, I know. I said, not that Jesus was operating in a system of divination. He was divine. He didn't need to invent a new system.
No.
But he was speaking to them in a language that he knew that they would understand. I said, that's why they ramped up their the intensity of trying to kill him and get rid of him, because he was gaining a following, and they didn't want that knowledge in his hands. They were astounded to find out how it is that this, you know, this man from Nazareth could know such things.
How could a carpenter know about our secret practices?
Yeah. So, but he seemed quite astonished that, you know, I had said that, and I said, what makes me more angry, I said, is that why was that not put in the Bible? Why was that information, which when you go to other resources, you can pull it together and you can see, you know, this isn't me just reaching for something. This is practices of the time, you know, in Babylon. And I said, why was that kept out of the Bible? I said, I just didn't think that they wanted people to know what it was. I said, there's a lot of information that was kept out.
Yep.
And that was one of them. You know, but these are the things that when you read that scripture tonight, that people will discern by the Spirit. God is speaking through the Spirit and pulling back and revealing to his children things that they had no other way of knowing.
Mm-hmm.
Were it not for being in communion with God, for him to reveal it.
Yep.
You know, and then we take what we have in terms of historical and cultural data, and we put the pieces together, and you can see it.
It's very clear.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, he was kind of astonished, you know, because a lot of the elite educators of the world today and the leaders, you know, and
those cloistered academics.
These few, you know, those people know exactly what I was talking about, and
Yep.
it wasn't a surprise to them.
Nope. All right. Well, thank you. And thank you for educating me too. So, let me get a little further along in the weeds, I guess. Because we are going to get a little technical tonight. We don't usually do this on Sundays, but these are coming together. These are pieces that are fitting. A pseudo-random number generator's number sequence is completely determined by the seed. Thus, if a pseudo-random number generator is reinitialized with the same seed, it will produce the same sequence of numbers. The choice of a good random seed is crucial in the field of computer security. Now, we've talked about encryption at length here, folks. That's why this is relevant. Encryption, cryptocurrencies, blockchain, the infrastructure of the beast system. They all fit into this. When a secret encryption key, Revelation 9, the angel is cast from heaven and given the key to the abyss. I am convinced that is a private key to unlock an encrypted code on how to open the abyss. When a secret encryption key is pseudo-randomly generated, having the seed will allow one to obtain the key. High entropy is important for selecting good random seed data. Now, high entropy means chaos. It means a seemingly random universe. If you look at the macro scale, scientists will tell you there's a high degree of entropy in the universe, a high degree of a lack of pattern in the universe, which is completely ridiculous, because the more white papers they publish with their supposed discoveries, those discoveries typically are revealing patterns that they have discovered in their experimentation, whether on the macro scale or on the nano scale, as we've been talking. It's always about patterns. You see, when they look on the macro scale and say, well, the universe is just a random collection of energy and particles, the problem is not that the universe is random. The problem lies in man's inability to recognize the pattern, the macro pattern of the universe, what I call the model of the universe. And then within that macro singular model of the universe, the patterns embedded within it as you move down in scale. So the universe is very, very, very ordered. To say that it is random flies in the face of God. There's nothing random about God. To know the mind of God is to recognize the patterns of God's creation. Man struggles to find those patterns. But you know, the patterns we're talking about tonight in random number generation in the Mantic arts is not discovering the patterns of God. It is discovering the lies coming from the spirit world, from the fallen angels. The information that is passed on through these Mantic arts is forbidden knowledge. And to say that you have to randomly, as a human, generate patterns that then by a skilled human will somehow recognize a pattern and then provide an answer to the human who made the random marks, provide an answer to the question that that human was posing to the skilled diviner. Again, the assumption is the skilled diviner is somehow connected at a higher level with the spiritual world and is given the interpretation that results in the answer given to the unskilled person creating the random patterns of numbers or other devices like sand or sticks or throwing of the dice. So they're going to the wrong source for their answers. This is what quantum computing is doing today. You've heard me say it many times over the years. Geordie Rose, who's no longer at D-Wave, but one of the founders of D-Wave, said that they are accessing 2 to the 500th power of parallel dimensions. Well, that's been superseded many times over. They're now into the 2 to the 2000th power of parallel dimensions. And we've redefined parallel dimensions here to make that understandable, that it's 2 to the 2000th power of demons. Because Geordie Rose even said that if we're smart enough, or if we're clever enough, we will be able to reach in and extract resources from those parallel dimensions. Well, that's divination. That's obtaining forbidden knowledge from the fallen angels through the thousands upon thousands of demons that they're communicating with through a quantum computer. Now that sounds completely preposterous. I understand that. I understand it's preposterous to say that. Because there are those of you out there, and I know that D-Wave listens to many of these broadcasts. I know that Geordie Rose listens to these broadcasts. For them, in their secular frame of mind, in their paradigm, in their strictly scientific, logical way of looking at the world. My statement is completely ludicrous. To say that they're communicating with demons, to say that they're receiving forbidden information, forbidden knowledge from what they consider to be parallel dimensions. But as you look at the origin of their operating system, combinatorial optimization, look at the roots of combinatorial optimization, their operating system, it goes back into geomancy. Many of you longtime patrons and listeners have heard me say this over and over and over again. But I'm leading up to the announcement that's coming between now and June from D-Wave. I'm priming you for this announcement that's coming out of D-Wave about their latest generation computer. So it's a good review. Combinatorial optimization comes straight out of Ramon Lull in the 12th century, in the Renaissance period, which comes straight out of his knowledge of geomancy. Geomancy communicates with spirits. Therefore, if it is the operating system of the D-Wave quantum computer, then logically, speaking to the scientists, you're communicating with spirits. Now, you're receiving back information that appears to be very logical, very mathematical, very technical, but it is based upon quantum mechanics, quantum computing. Quantum mechanics is based upon random number generation. It is about recognizing the pattern and the mechanics of subatomic fundamental particles. The patterns of fundamental particles, neutrons, protons, electrons, and smaller gluons, muons, quarks, leptons, and on and on. They are examining the patterns that appear to be random. They're generated by universe, as they would say. They are generated by God. They are trying to find the patterns. This is what CERN is doing. Trying to recognize the patterns post-collision in the collider. What are they trying to find in the pattern? The key to open the doorway to the abyss. Okay, let me go back and read this now that I've said that.
The key is encryption.
The choice of a good random seed is crucial in the field of computer security. When a secret encryption key is pseudo-randomly generated, having the seed will allow one to obtain the key. High entropy, meaning chaos, mean randomness. High entropy is important for selecting good random seed data. I'm reading this out of Wikipedia. Okay? I might as well be reading it from the book of Revelation. If the same random seed is deliberately shared, it becomes a secret key. So two or more systems using matching pseudo-random number algorithms and matching seeds can generate matching sequences of non-repeating numbers which can be used to synchronize remote systems such as GPS satellites and receivers. Random seeds are often generated from the state of the computer system, such as the time. A cryptographically secure pseudo-random number generator or from a hardware random number generator. You know what a hardware random number generator is? How about a couple of dice? Eric Ladizinski, a few years ago, was giving a presentation at a computer fair. There were lots of other booths and vendors and stuff. D-Wave had their booth and he was the vendor. And right over him on the projection screen was the 4 dice. I did this in a live stream a couple of years ago. The 4 dice that are connected on a rod. So there's 4 dice lined up, connected through their centers by a rod, and a cap on each end. And they were gold in color. That's what he had over his head. And I've published this in Entangled Magazine many times. And this situation in particular, I've published the photograph. But what I'm getting at here is he was telling those that are discerning on Satan's side and discerning on God's side, nonetheless, those that know what that represents, it's screaming geomancy. It's screaming mantic art. It is screaming random number generator. Why would he, one of the co-founders of D-Wave, partners with Geordie Rose, was Eric Ladizinski, and he's still there at D-Wave. Why would he give a presentation about his quantum computer and have a geomantic device over his head? See, I don't have to make this stuff up. I don't have to be hysterical. I don't have to run around like what hair I have left is on fire. I just state the facts. Those that have the eyes to see know exactly what he's saying. We are communicating with fallen angels, and all of our advancements in our computer systems are because we're obtaining information on how to build our systems from fallen angels. Now, Eric and Geordie would run around denying that for 1,000,000 years, would run around denying that. But all you have to do is look at history to know the players and how they play today. Nothing new under the sun.
You know, I find it interesting that after you were not on Kev Baker's show anymore, that Geordie Rose finally contacted Kev Baker about going on his show. Now, it would have been nice if Kev perhaps invited you back to maybe talk with him, but it reveals to you a lot that he went on after you were no longer there as a threat.
That's right.
Because why wouldn't Geordie Rose at this point contact you and want to come on and speak
on a live stream with us?
I would love to get Geordie Rose, yourself, myself, and my favorite scientist, gosh, why is his name is escaping me, from the African fractals, Ron Eglish.
Oh, Ron Eglish. Ron Eglish put us on the trail.
And
boy, Ron,
will,
if you ever hear this, you put us on the trail.
And this will, it would be a very scientific, mathematical, technological discussion.
And we'd have lots of whiteboards.
Yeah, people are asking me what that stuff is written on the back, and I told them it's just my random thoughts from things that we've done in the past and things that we want to put in the new book that we're working on. And these triangles that you see in the back are the outward expansion and movements of a particulate and how it comes together. So as it's been shown
I'm not
to
the
me.
only geek in the room.
So, but I think it says a lot that he went on, and of course Kev in no way was threatening to him in terms of asking very pointed or spiritual type questions. So, I would very much welcome being able to speak with Geordie Rose, the defining of the parameters we could discuss, but I would absolutely like to be able to talk with him, because I think it's important. He works on one side, we come at it from another side, and
he presents himself as being open-minded. Well, if he is open-minded to other ways of thinking, other interpretations, I would like to present the evidence we have regarding geomancy and computing, and we would, if Ron Eglish would join with us in that, fantastic. If not, we would bring his book as the evidence, as a scholarly evidence,
and read from that,
and present it to Geordie Rose.
Well, also the historical data that we have come up with in terms of, back in the days of Jesus with the Pharisees and Sadducees, and even further back than that with the prophet Daniel, and what was done in taught in Babylon. And
I'll tell you what, folks, if there was ever a need for a conference and a panel of speakers, I don't like conferences per se. I mean, you've heard me say it before. I don't want. But I'm saying, picture the panel and the conference. I think that would be worth the price of a ticket.
well, I don't know. This is not something that's going to be grasped or exploited in the world because it contains too much of their secrets.
Really it is.
And it's too easy to draw the conclusions when you know and you can see how it is that they are coming up with their foundation, and everything that they declare to be quantum is really just their ability to try and decipher the spiritual realm.
Yep.
And because when you're not a believer in God, you're trying to understand it, and you feel that you can explain the spirit through physical mediums and mathematics. Yes, and there are some things that they are trying to quantify, and they can't. And we have those missing pieces. And
we sure do.
Because the Holy Spirit has just been, faithful in the revelation and the understanding in telling us about, what I believe the mark is now, and how one of the myriad of ways that that's going to come about and be initiated. And, also the just the culmination as we see it all coming together right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I just find it interesting that somebody who is of the intellect, and he does have spiritual understanding, Geordie Rose, but he has his side of the spiritual where he's taking his orders and directive from, just as we on this side of Christ are taking our direction and receiving the power that we need. It's not just Satan increasing the power of his minions and followers, that are just going by leaps and bounds in terms of, this technology. That's right, we are. And the understanding of what it means to be fearfully and wonderfully made is becoming more and more evident.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that our prayers are affecting the spiritual realm. We're seeing the healings. We're seeing and it's like the Roman soldier who said to the Lord, you don't have to come to my house to heal my daughter. I'm a man under authority, with authority. I tell one, come, they come. I tell another, go, they go. And Jesus admired this man for understanding his position, his own position, Jesus' position, recognizing him as a king and ruler and one with authority and miraculous healing power, that Jesus was touched by his faith and did for him what he asked.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that the hand of God is touched by anyone in this day that has the faith to be able to go to him with belief that he can help their situation, because so many today aren't. That if God can find even a handful of people with faith that say, listen, would you help me? It's like, sure I will. If you believe I can do it and you want me to, and it's within my will and for my purposes and plans for you, then I absolutely will do that for you. You're my child.
Yep.
And not only that, I think it thrills God's heart when we desire to know what we are designed for. The power that he gave us to overcome, to tread on serpents and scorpions in their varying forms.
Yep.
And that's the power that we have today. And that's increasing in power. And so they need to be put on notice themselves. That, it's not just them increasing, it's us increasing in the power of God.
Yep.
That will ultimately require Jesus to come back here. His vengeance will be fully exercised, but until that time comes, he's letting his children see and know just a little bit about what we are capable of in him in this day and age. And so I think we can take heart in that, take courage in that fact, and by all means, absolutely don't be afraid to ask God for anything. You need a healing from cancer, you ask him for it. and we will pray with you in that vein, and you'll see it happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we have to understand it's a new day.
It is.
We do have power.
Alrighty, let's move on with this discussion that I've had here about some of the technical stuff. Kind of laid the foundation on the random number generation and the random seed. Let's go to Emnity, okay? E-N-M-I-T-Y in the Merriam-Webster. Enmity, hostility, antipathy, antagonism, animosity, rancor, animus, mean, deep-seated dislike or ill will. Think about Satan. Think about Satan and how he views Jesus when I read those words. A deep-seated dislike. That's putting it mildly. Enmity suggests positive hatred, which may be open or concealed, an unspoken enmity. Hostility suggests an enmity showing itself in attacks or aggression. Okay, so there's lots more here. I won't get into that too deeply. Let's go to the word. Genesis 3:15. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. I would like you to fill in on this one.
Well,
you brought it to me.
Well, when I was reading, about the seed and technology, understanding that the spirit of Satan is what propels the revelation and of knowledge that's coming about as the technological advances we see today. So I thought, again, we have to start being spiritually minded and understanding that the weapons that we are fighting with are not carnal, they are spiritual. So it's that understanding of the spiritual realm that allows us to see things on a multidimensional level. And when they were talking about, what do we call that? Go back. What was the screen? Seed what? Seed.
The random seed.
Random seed. Thank you. I'm sorry. That just went right out of my head.
That's all right.
When I was reading about this tonight, in a couple of articles that I came across, and then I went to Wikipedia and looked up random seed, I thought to myself, I will put enmity between your seed and the woman's. Now, I know that that also means offspring. I do. I know that that's what it means. But it also means that which brings to life things.
Mm-hmm.
It brings new things to life. So if we understand that part of what Satan is sowing in the spiritual realm are these seeds of enmity, if you will. I mean, he's not sowing seeds of enmity. God put the enmity there between the woman and the offspring, of Satan. But that is another aspect or facet that you can look at it in the spiritual realm and say, because when we look at enmity, are we just not seeing it in every aspect of our lives today, in the people that we work with, the people that we live with, our family, our relatives? I mean, we're opposing and not liking what's being done in our government or other governments for that matter. We have lost all respect, and yet we're called to pray for our leaders, but we don't respect them. We hope that the office they're supposed to represent we can uphold, as they say, in the Marines, if you can't salute the man, salute the office. We hold the utmost respect for the office and the ideals that it's supposed to represent, but men just don't measure up. They just don't fit the bill to even come close to filling what that role is supposed to entail.
Right.
And so there's no trust there anymore. And enmity is what seems to be the overarching feeling, emotions, characteristic that, is just the whole world. It's pervading the whole world.
Yeah, the whole world's at each other's throat.
So, and that is not God's spirit, that's Satan's spirit. So that seed, in a sense, has been planted. That's putting, the children of God at enmity between good and evil. And so I was just looking at random seed and thinking of that verse from Genesis about putting, that between.
Well, yeah, and again, it indicates in Genesis that, the heel of Jesus was bruised
Right.
by Satan.
Right.
But ultimately, Jesus will crush Satan's head.
He will.
And so that, in Genesis, is speaking of Revelation.
Right.
The Alpha and the Omega
That's right.
of the
beginning
scenario.
and the end. Yeah.
So, from the technical side, let me kind of fill in a little bit of the technical side when we're talking about the seed and the pseudo-random number generation. What is driving a wedge between man and God now is quantum computing. There's many others in science that I can cite, but quantum mechanics, of which quantum computing is derived from which it is derived from. Quantum mechanics is the overarching science of the world today. All other scientific disciplines fall under that umbrella of quantum mechanics. So, if we want to take the next step down from quantum mechanics, it's quantum computing. Because that's driving all other scientific disciplines, including all these discussions we've had about DNA lately related to the coronavirus. The modeling in silico of DNA. Yes, you can use classical computers, transistor-based. You can use supercomputers. Read that to you in the last live stream. Supercomputers creating in the computer new forms of biological forms. Not creating life, but creating new forms of biological forms. Well, you can do that with quantum computing as well. Okay? It's a very discrete problem in quantum computing, whereas a classical is a very broad question or problem to be solved. But nonetheless, when you take a very specifically defined problem in biology, that can be addressed using a quantum computer, as well as any other scientific discipline. But the point on the quantum computing is that the quantum computer is obtaining its solutions spiritually, because it is a divinatory machine. It is producing random numbers. If you might recall back several months, and even in Entangled magazine, I published about this, when we talk about random versus infinite. How do you determine whether a number is actually truly random or not? Okay? The only device on the planet right now that can truly produce something that man would consider to be truly, absolutely random is generated by a quantum computing system. The reason it is considered to be random is that it's considered to be an infinite number. That it did not come from a seed. The pseudo-random number is started with a seed number that itself is selected. It's not a random seed. It's a selected seed. It's purposeful. It came from a known source, that number, that then produced a string of random numbers. Think about DNA. DNA is the seed. Think about the sequence of DNA. They can appear to be random unless you can identify the pattern. And this is where DNA research has been focused, is determining those patterns within DNA. But the DNA patterns that do have a pattern, but at first appear to be random, starts with a seed. And the seed was created by God. The wedge, the seed that is the wedge, is the seed that is purposefully and identifiable in its origin. It is the seed of the pseudo-random number generation, the seed of Satan, that drives the wedge between man and God today. And the mechanism, the primary mechanism, is quantum computing. Why? Because it, more than transistor-based classical supercomputers, which are also divinatory machines, also based on geomancy, but the amount of information obtained through classical computing is so small in comparison to the amount of information that is obtained through quantum computing and the speed at which it obtains that information. Let me make it simple. Picture the 4 die, okay, a single die of a pair of dice, a single die, 4 die on the rod. Eric Ladizinski talking about his quantum computers. Take those 4 die, and what they do is they simply rotate those die on the rod by holding the caps on the end and rolling it, okay, make a circle with the rod, rolling the dice, and then holding it still, and the dice roll and come to a stop on the rod, producing a random sequence of numbers. That's what a quantum computer does at light speed. They have 2,000 qubits, 2048 specifically, in their 2000 Q model that they've had out now for a couple of years. And we have NSA, CIA, we have Los Alamos National Laboratory, goes on and on and on, Volkswagen, others that are using, and now D-Wave through their LEAP program, they have cloud-based access to their computers. All of that is rolling the dice and getting spiritually information from the other side. 2 to the 2000th power of demonic spirits providing information. That's a lot of information. Now the computer that I'm about to introduce to you has over 5,000 qubits. So we're now over 2 to the 5,000th power. Again, this is the definition of their accessing parallel dimensions by Geordie Rose, founder of D-Wave. I'm not making this up, I'm reporting. And it's not interpretation, it is stating the facts as to how the mechanisms operate. Okay? So, let's go to that 2 to the 5,000th power computer. I'm going to put some graphics up here. Let me just jump ahead. There we go. Come on, let's go, computer. I need a quantum computer. This thing just runs so slow, and
No, you don't.
it's not the computer, it's the it's the software. It's very clunky. All right. I'm going to take you to a brand new quantum chipset. Now this has been out. You go to D-Wave's website. They've been talking about this since June of last year, and in the white papers I've read that they've published, even before that, back in 2018 they were talking about this. Okay, but we'll just kind of pick it up from here. Let me put this up first. If you'll watch this animation, for those of you that are just listening to the live stream, if you'll go to your computer screen. When you look at these circles, these dots, those are individual qubits. And what it is building in this animation are the connections between those qubits. And these are known as chains. Now, some of you that know something about quantum computers may not be familiar with the term chains. C-H-A-I-N-S, chains, just like a metal chain. Isn't it interesting that they chose the word chain? Chain are the connections between qubits. We'll come back to this. Does that not remind you of my 600 cell tetrahedron, the model of the universe? I'm claiming it. It's God's model, not mine, but I'm claiming it. Not taking it from God. I'm just simply reporting on God's model. I think through the Holy Spirit, He shared that with me when I wrote my first book, Covert Catastrophe, and published it in 2013, and then built out the computer in 2048, Diamonds in the Rough, the second book that came out in 2014. On the left is what's known as the Chimera chipset of D-Wave's quantum computer, the 2000 qubit that is out right now. It's chipset because they use names for their chipsets. That's the present one. The one on the right is Pegasus. Now, if you look at the connections here, they look identical, except on the right you have these black lines making these connections. The connections on the left for Chimera are two-dimensional. The connections on the right with Pegasus are three-dimensional. This, in algebra, in quadratic equations of algebra, takes us to three-dimensional algebraic formulas. I'll make it even simpler. Chimera, the present computer, computes two-dimensionally. I said in 2014, using the 600 cell tetrahedron as the model of God's universe, and if you're going to build a universal computer, it must be identical to the model of the universe. I said in my novel in 2014 that you have to have a three-dimensional structure to your universal computer. Three-dimensional because in its simplest form, its simplest component is the three-dimensional four-sided polytope, the tetrahedron. What you are looking at on the right-hand side, B, the Pegasus, is a tetrahedral arrangement of qubits, a three-dimensional arrangement of qubits. Folks, they are moving towards building this 600 cell computer, and I said that back in 2014. This is leading, Pegasus, coming out in June of this year, is leading towards what you see at the bottom. Three-dimensional computer. I want to show you this. This is a graphic from 2011, and I had no knowledge of this white paper. Peer-reviewed. In June of 2013, I'd already published Covert Catastrophe. I came across this paper, and it knocked me over. You are looking at a tetrahedron. Each point, each vertex is a qubit. 1, 2, 3, and 0 as the starting point. There are 4 qubits. It's a four-sided polytope. It's a tetrahedron. The white paper said, and I published this in Entangled magazine, It stated that in order to minimize decoherence between qubits, you must arrange those qubits in a tetrahedral pattern. Decoherence leads to errors. Decoherence is the breaking down of the connections between qubits. In order to maintain for the longest period possible and thereby compute the largest number, the largest problem possible, you must, for the longest time possible, maintain the connection between qubits. There are two things that make up the connections between qubits. One is the physical. Those are known as Josephson junctions. Let's call that the hard wiring between qubits. And those are the lines illustrated in this graphic here. Those are the junctions. They're known as JJs. So they physically wire up between the qubits so that they'll communicate, so that they can produce, with very little error, a solution. The second way that they are connected is through the namesake of my magazine, quantum entanglement, spooky action at a distance, as Einstein said. When you, for example, let's take the qubit that is labeled as a 0 and you change its spin. Let's imagine the 0 is spinning up. And it's connected physically and through quantum entanglement with the number 1 qubit. And number 1 is spinning down. Well, if you change 0 from an up to a down, it immediately changes the 1, which is pointing down, to an up. Okay? That's quantum entanglement in a simplest explanation or example.
Cancellation.
It is. What I'm illustrating to you here is a graphic from 2011 that I had already published, my 600 cell tetrahedron universal quantum computer, qubits arranged in a tetrahedron, and this paper knocked me off my chair. That comes from the Holy Spirit. This is quantum annealing. I know we're getting deep into this a little bit, but bear with me. This is a graph showing an energy state, okay, up and down, and another energy state. One of the unique things besides quantum entanglement with a quantum computer is that in the process of quantum annealing that deals with energy states, okay, is quantum tunneling. Rather than having to raise the energy of a system up here and then allow it to come down into this valley. The strange thing about quantum computing is that the qubits can tunnel through this energy peak. They can take a shortcut and then reach this low energy valley here, the ground state. And it is in this ground state valley, at the bottom of this valley, where they find their answers. This is known, this shape here, this graph, if you will, is what's known as the topological shape, the topological morphology of the chipset. If you were to take a chipset, imagine a computer chip, and you were to hold it in your hand and hold it horizontally, flat, at eye level, and you were to look across the surface of that chipset, and it was the chipset from a quantum computer. Imagine seeing peaks and valleys across that landscape, just like a topological map provides elevations topologically. You're looking at that landscape here, folks. Peaks and valleys of energy. And they manipulate the energy in order to find the lowest ground state of a qubit. And that's where the answers come from. This factors into the superconductivity discussion of why they are cryogenically cooling quantum computers to just a few millikelvin above absolute zero. Yes, it's for superconductivity of the Josephson junctions, the wiring for the flow of electrons, but it is also so that they can keep the system as cold as possible. This is the whole discussion of quantum annealing, is manipulation of heat in the quantum chipset. And it's at that cold valley, let's call it the abyss, where the answers are coming from. They are spiritually in the abyss at the bottom of this graph. And the information that they're being given by these soon-to-be 2 to the 5,000th power of demons comes out of the pit of hell. Now we know from Scripture that hell is hot. Burn in hell. But I think this is figuratively and perhaps spiritually accurate in showing the source of their energies, of their answers from this lower state, ground state energy location. Let's look at the chipset a little bit more. This is a representation of the wiring diagram of Pegasus. And this is what's coming out in June. When you look at it straight down, it appears as it is on the left. When you turn that slightly and you look through these connections, it's what you see on the right. These are the tetrahedrons. These are the three-dimensional interconnections of the qubits. Okay? It is no different than this. This is on the right-hand side in the Pegasus quantum computer. They're moving towards the 600 cell. They're moving towards building this. I don't know how far along they are, but I'm quite confident they're way beyond the Pegasus already. Here's the Chimera's wiring diagram, the 2000Q that is out now and has been for a couple of years. I have said for years, even before the Chimera came out, that it would not just be 2000, it would be 2048 qubits, because there is a base 2 multiplication from model to model of the number of qubits. Preceding the 2048 was the 1024. Before that was the 512. Before that, the 256. Before that, the 124. Or the 128. 124. 124. So, no, the 128. 128, 256, yep. Doing this by memory, folks. I'm old. 512, 1024, 2048, 4096, and beyond. Okay? Remember the magical number at the 10th model of the quantum computer in that base 2 progression of qubits. The 10th model is 65,536 qubits, the same as the number of tubulin dimers in a single human neuron. And in geomancy, 65,536 is the maximum number of combinations of the 16 geomantic figures, and we're going to see those in a moment. But here it is, 2048, just as I have been saying for years about the 2000Q. But they never talk about that. They never advertise it. The C16, that's Clifford 16 mathematics. That's dimensional. That speaks directly. Clifford 16, it's actually called an E8 Clifford 16. You know what that is? the E8 Clifford 16, it's the 600 cell tetrahedron. That's how you describe it. E8 Clifford 16. Folks, they are moving straight towards building that 600 cell tetrahedron because they know that the model of the universe is exactly what I'm showing you right there. Okay? To bolster that, I shared this paper way back. You mentioned Kev Baker. Way back when I was on Truth Frequency Radio, I shared that paper with him. I've published it in Entangled Magazine. Tony Dodd, his name is
Tony Dodd.
Tony Dodd Smith Jr. out of CERN. After 6 months after I published in 2014, 2048 Diamonds in the Rough, you see where I got the number, 2048 Diamonds in the Rough, back in 2014, okay, because I was all about quantum computers in that novel. 6 months after I published that novel in 2014, Tony Dodd Smith published his paper out of CERN, completely supporting mathematically everything that I said about the 600 cell, including the 600 cell, but he did not name this as the model of the universe. He did not cite this as God's construct. Tony Dodd Smith Jr. from CERN. But he acknowledged the progression, the replication of the tetrahedrons into this 600 cell. E8 Clifford 16. Mathematics is what he employed. What he did not say is that the tetrahedron is the singularity of the universe. And I credit Buckminster Fuller for that notion, where he said that the simplest polytope that can enclose a volume is a tetrahedron. Buckminster Fuller did not say that that was the shape of the first matter and energy of the universe, the singularity. I did. I said the tetrahedron is the shape of the singularity, and that it then replicated, just like cell mitosis, into, on the macro scale, this 600 cell as the model of the universe. Tony Dodd Smith didn't say that the tetrahedron was the singularity, nor did he say that the 600 was the model of the universe, but he might as well have said it, because he came to the same conclusion mathematically and geometrically that I did. It's all about replication of tetrahedrons. So this goes back to D-Wave. They know that they have to arrange the qubits for the greatest accuracy. To reduce decoherence, they have to arrange the qubits, connect the qubits tetrahedronally. And this is what is coming out in June. The Pegasus, three-dimensionally connecting, three-dimensional tetrahedrons connecting the qubits. Starting with this. Again, white paper from 2011. Did you have something to add? Because I've got a lot more to say.
No,
ahead.
I did.
Go
But,
ahead.
you know, some of these drawings that we have on the board behind us is, you know, what God has shown me about the outward expansion of his universe from the very particulate level. And that was that he had shown me how he operated in a quaternary system. The quaternary system actually representative of infinity, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Because within the quaternary system is a complete ternary system that builds upon itself and firms itself up, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
as its foundation, as it's always reaching out in the next in one move.
Correct.
For every system, that every transgression, if you will, that Satan makes, he has to go back over that. It's again that recursive process.
Mm-hmm.
In order to even make one move across God's construct requires 7 moves of Satan And every time he makes one move within that recursive 7 move pattern, God is outwardly expanding 4 more.
That's right.
Firming up his ternary system within a quaternary infinite system. I know that sounds a little bit hard to understand, but it's exactly.
The quaternary are the moves that represents the quadratic now with Pegasus. The quaternary, you have binary, ternary. Okay, so you have 2 with binary, 3 with ternary. This is how mathematics operates. You then have the quaternary, the 4 system of mathematics. And those quaternary are the same as the quadratic, algebraic, mathematical systems of the Pegasus 3-dimensional chipset. So your moves that you are demonstrating in the live stream that you have on the board, and it's on camera right now, those quaternary moves are reproduced in the Pegasus chip as the moves within the computer. The moves are the connecting lines between the qubits 3-dimensionally.
Yes.
Because a tetrahedron has 4 faces.
Right.
4-faced polytope.
But the disconnect is what I'm trying to get at, that they cannot seem to achieve, is that they are trying to achieve a quaternary system when they are
Stuck.
cemented in a balanced ternary system.
Right.
Not even a ternary system.
Right.
Which is why they have to compensate by making things seem like they are in superposition, when in fact it is the same, and it's a process of cancellation that will always leave them at 0.
Exactly.
Always.
And when we look at, in this graphic, let me go back to that. And we're going to go over time tonight, folks. I'm sorry, if you need a break, I'll tell you what we're going to do. At the top of the hour, at 9 o'clock Eastern here, in about 7 minutes, we're going to take a 5-minute break because we're going to go over time tonight. I'll try to keep it to 30 minutes, but we're getting deep in the weeds, and I'm all worked up about this. So you may have to come back and watch this at another time. But 0 is their starting point. Let's use this graphic for what you talk about, laying down the lines. And those of you that have seen the live stream, you know what we're talking about here. But it is a recursive system and superposition. So when Satan starts vertical, let's say 0 to 3, we're just going to take that vertical line, and he lays down over to 1. Okay? His starting point is 0. His pivot point is 0. He lays down to 1. He thinks he's moved forward. You want to take it from there?
No, go ahead. You can continue.
And then recursively, he has to return to the laying down position. And then he gets to stand up. He gets to lay down. Then he gets to stand up again. He thinks he's making progress, but this is the figure 8 of the Ouroboros. This is the cycle of the Ouroboros, is the figure 8 of infinity. It is the superposition. He is at 0, and when he stands up and he says, well, I'm a 1 now, so let's replace the 3 with a 1, because we're just using this as a simple example. In superposition, a 0 can be a 1 at the same time in quantum computing. A 1 can also be a 0 at the same time. That's superposition, according to how they want to explain it.
It's just a pivot move.
The 0, and now we'll replace the 3 up here with a 1 because he's standing up. The 0 and the 1, he claims as a superposition. He's vertical in his move. I know it sounds strange to think about Satan making line moves.
But it doesn't.
But if you think about how they're representing it with connecting cubits. The cubits reflect the movements of Satan. Okay? So
and define the pattern that he
is trapped in.
has to work in. If you remember, this is like a spiritual arc. It's like a spiritual blueprint. What you're looking at right here is a spiritual blueprint. But if you notice, they are working in a ternary system. But they don't have access to it because they themselves will tell you we are stuck in balanced ternary, which is why they have to make superposition sound so good. Oh yeah, this is a superposition to be in.
Right.
But
So
basically,
standing up vertical, they claim as a superposition of
well,
1 and
at
0.
every point, it's at that pivot point when they become vertical. At that moment, the position that they're in is -1, 0, and 1 at the same time.
Right.
Because it's what they have, because of the direction and movement that they have to, that they are bound to. It's not that they are bound to that by God's laws, and that hasn't changed.
They're bound to 0.
They're bound to a recursive movement and pattern that has to be played out before they can go on and advance in what is their mind. But really what they're doing is just laying down over the lines that God has already created and in fact strengthened, because he, operating in the quaternary system, infinity, is always moving outward, and he leaves his prior movement intact as he goes on to the next.
Yep.
But and you can see this play out in the spiritual realm, because when God says, how many times should we forgive? He says, I tell you 7 times 70. If this represents God's spiritual construct, and it does, it shows us that our walls, those lines, are ever before him. That he has laid out the foundation. And if that represents a man's life, and we have shown how it does, and how Satan infiltrates men and generations to come, because it's all connecting. But God doesn't make it easy for Satan, because for him to even claim one side, one portion of that construct, he has to go back over it 7 times. When he first comes to that point and is vertical and has to lay down and then become vertical again, and then lay down and become vertical again, and then lay down and become vertical again. That is his full process. 7 moves. That's God saying, I tell you 7 times 70 is how many times, how much I will forgive you. In other words, God can never, ever, Satan can never move enough that God cannot forgive.
Yep.
But yet he is bound to that process. So at every point, and I use that term specifically, at every point where Satan has to turn to move in that pattern before he can move out in another direction, that one position is his beginning point, his advancement point, and his ending point, all at the same time. It's -1, 0, 1, and it always ends up being canceled out.
Yep.
He always winds up with 0 because he can never do anything new.
That's right.
He has to, basically he traces and traverses God's construct. By annealing, he's trying to cut across in half, if you will, the triangle, but he can't go anywhere because it's a perfect shape.
Yep.
He can only go along what God has already created. But if he goes back and forth 7 times, God will forgive, yes, but at some point he actually lays claim to that line in that person's life. If that person will not yield to God and give over himself to sin, Satan has a right to traverse that line in a man's life, because that person has not gotten right with God.
Yep.
And then you see concentrations, which are seen in the darker primary color, if you will. Those are the lines that Satan has claimed in a man's life. And when those concentrations become heavy, you look at it from a color perspective. You look at it from the color spectrum. And you can, it's like looking at a pie graph. You know, you can see where concentrations are heavier, where much infiltration has happened.
Yep.
God, we've said, operates in the pastels.
Yep.
That spectrum. So, you know, This right here in front of you is a lie, because they're talking about a ternary system, and they are not in ternary, they're in balanced ternary, and that's all
Right.
they'll ever be in.
Exactly. Exactly. So let's take a 5-minute break. I'll go ahead and put a little music on. Those of you that are able to stay with us, we invite you to stay with us. And I will play a couple of songs while we have 1 Corinthians on the screen. And we'll be right back. Okay, and we are back. Again, let me know in the chat room if you can see and hear okay. I never know after we come back from these breaks if things are still working or not. We're going to roll, and I will make every effort to get this done by 9:30. So just let me know in the chat room, thumbs up. Let me know things are okay. Good. Excellent. Thank you, guys. Appreciate that. Alrighty. Let's wrap up this discussion on D-Wave. I'm going to just run through a few more slides for you. So going back to where I kind of left off, this is the three-dimensional. On the left-hand side is the two-dimensional chimera with the Clifford 16 mathematical arrangement of qubits. Over here, we're looking at the three-dimensional arrangement, the tetrahedral arrangement of qubits. Okay? Imagine these blue lines connecting the qubits now as chains that run in 3 dimensions. They have the Clifford 16 here of the two-dimensional wiring diagram, and now they're adding to it another direction of connection. So I'm going to leave that up, and I want to read something to you very quickly. It is a little bit technical, but I'll read it through quickly and I'll take it apart for you. This is coming from D-Wave. This is one of their white papers. This paper describes D-Wave's next generation processor topology. That is the pattern that defines how the processor's qubits and couplers interconnect. The flexible architecture of these new processors supports simple design modifications able to produce various topologies, the Pegasus family of topologies. Pegasus is a significant advancement over D-Wave's Chimera topology, which is available in the 2000Q product and its predecessors. Okay, so what they're saying is this is a new paradigm. Again, simplifying, they're moving from two-dimensional to three-dimensional computing. This is a big deal, folks. Pegasus features qubits of degree 15 and native K4 and K66 subgraphs. Advantages of this new topology include more efficient embeddings and novel class of couplers that help error correction schemes. I'm summarizing here quickly, taking some of the technical out of this. In Pegasus, as in Chimera, qubits are oriented vertically or horizontally. In Chimera, there are two types of coupler: internal couplers that connect pairs orthogonal or with opposite orientation qubits. So there's internal, and now they're going to external couplers connecting pairs of qubits in parallel. Now what they're doing is they're adding what are known as odd couplers. Now, isn't it funny? You and I yesterday were talking about the odd couple with Jack Lemmon and yeah, okay. The odd couplers. Odd couplers connect parallel qubit pairs in adjacent rows or columns. So, I'm just going to save you from a lot of this technical stuff. I'm going to put up a graphic. It's going to help picture what's going on.
Can you show that one with the geomancy?
Yeah, we'll get there. So here's a kind of an extracting, if you will, from the more complex that's above, and of course my 600 cell. This is showing the interconnections, the external connections, and those existed with the previous Chimera chip. Now what they're adding are the odd connections. Think of it this way: X, Y, and Z. So they had the length and they had the width as far as connecting lines. Now they're going to height. with a third line. That's the odd coupler. That creates the 3 dimensions using the tetrahedrons. Again, this is reflecting in the red dots all of the qubits, and this is a 3-dimensional orientation. Just as a review, this is the Chimera chipset right here, the 2000Q. And going back, this is a 512. This is a more familiar picture to most of you of D-Wave's quantum computers. All this is around it is the armature that holds the wiring, and also the wiring of the Josephson junctions within the qubits, but also the pulse dilution refrigeration out around the outside that keeps us super cold. Okay? The timeline for development of these qubit chipsets. So we're looking back here at the year 2002 and their prototypes along here. The first commercially available was the 128. So they started with 4 qubits, 16, 28, and then 128. Then mathematically, the power of 2, base 2, they went from 128 to 512. And this says the 1000 qubit. That's not accurate. It's the 1024. And then we go from there, from the 1024 to the 2000 qubit. Again, they call it 2000 for a model number for simplification. But it is actually the 2048, as we showed you before. So this graphic down here is a little blurry, but it goes out to 2017. That's when the 2048 or the 2000 model came out, was in 2017. And they've been upgrading that. Okay? Now they're going to a completely different form, as I've been saying, all the way out now to using quantum tunneling, their ability now to go 3-dimensionally. So think about this now going vertically, not just horizontally with their quantum tunneling. All right. What does all this mean? It means that now they can run, to make it simple, they can run quadratic equations in 3 dimensions. They can use 3 qubits and then 4 qubits connected in the tetrahedral arrangement. The more qubits, the faster the processing. The more qubits, the bigger the problem that they can address. To put it spiritually, the more qubits provides them access to more demonic entities, because it's a divinatory process, which in itself, as I said at the beginning, is communicating with spirits. You'll never find anybody at D-Wave to admit that. But Eric Ladizinski and Geordie Rose, I'm quite certain, know all about the spiritual mechanisms and the spiritual operating system and the spiritual ramifications. Geordie Rose might as well have just thrown out the word dimension or parallel dimensions and just said we're communicating with spirits. There are no parallel dimensions. None whatsoever. There's this reality, and there is heaven, and there is hell. There are no parallel dimensions. But science in quantum mechanics wants to talk about the multiples of dimensions out there. 56 dimensions, 11 dimensions, 4 dimensions. They want to talk about string theory. They want to talk about the multi-universe theory, the field theory of how the universe operates. We have people running around that are called theoretical physicists, theoretical cosmologists, that's the study of the universe, theoretical astrophysicists and astrobiologists, all predicated, all preceded by the word theoretical. Hi, I can be theoretical, you can be theoretical. We can say the universe is made up of jello if we want to. Doesn't violate the terms and the definition of theoretical, does it? So you can talk about parallel dimensions and string theory all day long. Quantum field theory, you can talk about it all day long. You can talk about quantum mechanics, which is nothing more than probabilities. Random number generation. Look it up if you don't believe me. Quantum mechanics is based on probabilities. I've said this over and over for years. Quantum mechanics in its simplest definition for you. I'm not being condescending. I'm kind of leaping over your shoulders, patrons, to those guys that are always in the background, that before I even put out the last live stream, before I even sent to you through Patreon the link to last Thursday's live stream, before I even sent you the link, before any of you even knew the live stream existed, I had 3 people in the background in the chat room. Already, the live stream was running on YouTube, but I hadn't sent you the link, and it's unlisted. Only you guys get to see it. And I had 3 people in the chat, in the background watching. Not typing into chat, I'm just saying watching in the background. Those are the guys I'm talking to right now. Theoretical is just what it says. And yet these guys collect a paycheck, have long careers, like Michio Kaku, I don't even know how to pronounce his name. Do you know he's a community college physics teacher? But now he's labeled as a theoretical physicist. I have nothing against those that teach at the community college level, but let's get real, folks. Let's be transparent. And yet he, like Neil deGrasse Tyson, are trotted out by the media, and they put out all these theories, all these suppositions, all these fantasies that they make up. You know why they're doing that? Because they're getting all the fantasies of Satan, and they're espousing the fantasies of Satan. Plain and simple. Just like Kathleen was saying, he wants to say, oh, I'm in a superposition because my 0 is a 1 and my 1 is a 0. Horse pucky.
He has to say something good about the system of movement that he's bound to.
Exactly. That's like someone who, unfortunately or fortunately, whatever, but is in prison, in a prison cell, screaming, I'm free! And the guard stands there and just
whatever.
thinks, okay, dude.
In your mind.
Well, I'm the guard, Kathleen's the guard, you guys are the guards, and we're all saying, you ain't free, Satan. Mm-hmm. And you may have 2 to the 2,000th power of your little minions bouncing around in there with you, but you ain't getting out. In fact, you're going to be put even deeper in prison by Jesus Christ. And you can trot around with your crown of hubris on you all you want. And you can think all you want about yourself and all of your third of the fallen angels. And all of these people in quantum mechanics running around with all their theories, all their, equations on the board, and they can say, well, it's string theory, and it's bubble theory, and it's jello theory. They can't prove any of it. Now, I could claim that I am a theoretical physicist. don't have a PhD. I don't have a diploma and all that nonsense. But you know what? I'm going to put this up there. Come on. Slow molasses software. Should call this molasses software. When I put this 600 cell up here, I'm a theoretical physicist when I say this is my model of the universe. Can I prove that that's the actual geometrical and mathematical model of the universe? No. I can't. And neither can anybody prove string theory or quantum field theory or parallel dimensions. No one. But I think I can make a pretty good case. And maybe they can make a pretty good case about their theories. But they are all theories, including my own. So I'm going to get a t-shirt that says theoretical physicist on it. You know what? Back in the days of Aristotle and Plato and moving forward, before we had the university systems, those guys didn't have degrees. They didn't have a sheepskin on the wall. I don't need that either. Because like you, we can think independently, we can think critically, and we can pray, and we can receive information through the Holy Spirit. I don't need a title and I don't need a degree. But you know what? Kathleen and I think you would agree. Not because we're, smart, intelligent, special, but we've been seeking information through prayer and it's being given to us, just like it's being given to a lot of you. Don't need a degree for that. We need salvation. And all these guys that I'm kind of leaping over you and I'm referring to that watch these things, watch our conversations, they're baffled. They cannot figure out how two average people, Kathleen and myself, come up with all this. And I'm sure they don't disagree, or they don't agree with 99% of what we say from a scientific point of view. But you know what? When we start talking about the origins of computing, when we start revealing combinatorial optimization, when we start talking about qubits arranged in a tetrahedral pattern and the model of the universe, they're like, how do these people even come up with this stuff? I'm not tooting my own horn here. I'm not blowing our trumpet here. I'm certainly not blowing a shofar. I'm simply saying, if you seek the information from God, He, according to His plan, according to His wishes for you, He will reveal that which He wants you to know. The mind of God, the mind of the Lord, the mind of Christ will be revealed through prayer. And this is why, as Kathleen shared with you about sharing with an academic about geomancy, Jesus Christ in the temple with the Pharisees and Sadducees, he was aghast at her having that knowledge. She got it from the Holy Spirit. There's no denying that. So we don't need PhDs and all that nonsense. So let's finish up with a little bit about geomancy. As I said, just before we went on the air, one of our patrons sent this corporate logo to me. And you can look this up. There's a YouTube video from the corporation, a promo video about their service that they offer. The company is called Clear. This is their logo. On the right are the 16 basic geomantic figures of which you can produce combinations of those figures totaling 65,536. Clear Communications, their logo, right here, has embedded in it the geomantic figures. You can see. Does that not also remind you of the 600 cell tetrahedron? Clear transforms your biometrics into an encrypted code. The pattern of ones and zeros is unique to you and only you. What Clear is doing is they are providing you with a process by which you can be pre-screened, pre-cleared from a security standpoint, pre-cleared to enter a arena, a football stadium, a basketball arena, a venue. And the way that you get pre-screened is you go up to a kiosk that looks like an ATM, has a monitor screen like you would find at an ATM, and it has a place on the kiosk where you can place your right hand. You can place your thumb on a scanner and it will scan your thumbprint. It will then take a picture of you and you provide some of your background information, your date of birth, your name, address, phone number, whatever it's asking for, in order to clear you from a security standpoint. Once you are added into the Clear database, which, by the way, is a blockchain system, infrastructure of the beast system, once you've willingly given your information with your right hand and your face, you can then bypass the long lines of people waiting to buy tickets to get into a venue because you've been pre-screened. I shouldn't say buy tickets, I should say that are being screened at the gate, you know, with the metal detector wands and checking your backpacks and Lord knows what else they're checking at the security checkpoint. You don't have to go through the security checkpoint because you're in the database for Clear and you walk right on past those long lines. You remember how Kathleen and I said to you many, many months ago that they were going to sell the beast system by way of convenience? And when you watch the Clear video, I can't play it because I'll get a copyright strike, but go out to YouTube, you'll find Clear. They would sell the beast system with the bait of convenience. Look at what Amazon has done. And in their video, Clear's video, they even say that. We will make it more convenient for you. Just jumps right off the screen at you. Convenience. 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 When they sell convenience to you, it's because you are paying a price for that convenience. This is all more of not only revealing the origins of this system being in geomancy, but it is revealing the march towards the mark of the beast. Do we need any more proof? Do we need any more infrastructure? Does the Antichrist, as I said on Thursday, does the Antichrist need any more infrastructure built? I would say no. I think there's more than enough here. That is an indication, what's in it for us, that's an indication of how close the revealing of the Antichrist identity is in the timeline and the return of Jesus Christ. I read all those tweets to you at the beginning because of what's going on in the Middle East and what's going on with coronavirus. There's a depopulation agenda. We know that from the Georgia Guidestones. Reduce the population from 7.4 billion down to 500 million with an M. Is that what coronavirus is for? I don't know. God could put a stop to it at any point. He could use it as a warning. Red flag on the field. Hey guys, I can wipe you out if you don't turn your face to me and get right with me. I can judge you right now if I want. God could stop the coronavirus in its tracks, but I don't think that's going to happen. Is it going to kill a third of mankind? I don't know. Is Damascus about to be wiped out? Completely uninhabitable? Are the Israelis going to nuke Damascus? It sure looks like we're getting there. Because the stick prodding the Russian bear and prodding the stick in the eye of Iran is Hamas, just like we said a couple of weeks ago. They'll keep sticking at Hamas. I'm no fan of Hamas. I'm no supporter of what they do. They're a terrorist organization. I'm in support of the Palestinian people because they're humans like the rest of us, including the Iranians. They all need Jesus Christ. But Israel is going to touch that nerve of Hamas because Hamas is an operative of Iran, and that's the ultimate target for Israel. It's the seventh nation of the Masonic agenda. Albert Pike, the seventh nation on their list, the last one on their list, is Iran. So it's inevitable. So the more they irritate and attack Hamas, which irritates Iran, the closer it comes to this nuclear exchange between Israel and Iran, which involves Damascus, because there are 13 Iranian military bases in Syria. And the command and control for Syria, for Assad, is Damascus. Israel wants to take out Assad, wants to take out Iran. They'll do that by starting with Hamas. Benjamin Netanyahu, for over a week now in Israel, has been saying that he is going to deal with Hamas once and for all. I'm paraphrasing. But the point is, he is once and for all going to deal with Hamas before March 2nd and their elections. And I said at the opening of this tonight, I don't think there's going to be a March 2nd elections. The rank and file Israeli doesn't want to bear the cost of it, the monetary cost, and the outcome's not going to be any different. Virtually every analyst says that. So they won't do it. They'll go to war. Does that mean there's going to be a nuclear exchange with Iran before March 2nd? I don't know. But things move pretty quickly over there. We've got Turkey hitting from the north down on Assad. Turkey driving, and that's Russia, driving towards Damascus. The Turks are no friends of the Israelis. I think that Damascus involves Iran and Turkey and Russia and Assad's troops, all rolled into one target point. And I think this is what Netanyahu and the United States are waiting for. They're going to wait until all the eggs are in one basket. And then they're going to drop a couple of nukes. on that basket, and on Tehran at the same time, and other strategic Iranian missile sites. The missile sites are the true existential threat to Israel. But Israel's going to lose at least 1 million people, in my estimation. But as I have said in many live streams, the Kabbalists that set the Zionist agenda for expanding Israel to bring back the borders of the Levant, they know a sacrifice to Satan is required. And so the Kabbalists will sacrifice 1 million of their own Israeli inhabitants, be they Palestinian, Jews, Orthodox Jews, Christians, Muslims. They don't care. Because they believe by undergoing this sacrifice, like they did with 9/11, make no mistake about it, that sacrifice will usher in their Mashiach, their Antichrist. That's the Kabbalists. I'm not talking about the average Jew. I'm talking about the Kabbalists, the Talmudic Jew, the mystic, the satanic, the mantic art practitioners. That's who we're talking about. And now you see D-Wave fitting into this, don't you? The mantic arts are at the heart of what is going on because that's how they get their information. I don't have information to back up what I'm about to say, but it is conjecture. I would not be surprised to learn that Israel has not just cloud access to D-Wave's quantum computers, but one or more physical D-Wave computers in Israel. I can't back that up. But it would only make sense that they would, because our intelligence community is rife with the 2000Q from D-Wave, and our laboratories, our weapons labs, our nuclear labs. Okay? So there is no reason that Israel would be isolated from access from the D-Wave quantum computers, which are the most powerful geomantic devices, divinatory devices known to man. Therefore, the Kabbalists who built those quantum computers, the Kabbalists have a D-Wave or multiple D-Wave quantum computers. And with that, they are divining the future.
Prognostications.
It's all about prognostications, and it always has been for thousands of years. Whether you're talking about Middle East and Mesopotamia or China itself, who are huge, and we've shared all that with you, huge practitioners. It's all about prognostication, always has been. It's how all the kingdoms have always operated, was in prognostication. So Israel, most definitely, the Talmudic Jew Kabbalist, is using D-Wave quantum computers to foretell the future as to the timing of their strike on Damascus and Tehran. I'm convinced of that, just from a scientific standpoint, but also in my spirit. And Kathleen as well, in our spirit, we know this to be true. Because they're the source of the quantum computing, the Kabbalists. Because they are the source of the geomantic practices of times gone by. Remember, I've said many, many times, the Kabbalists, especially targeted and identified in the year 1840 in the United States, infiltrated the university systems, manipulated the university systems from within. Okay? They infiltrated, they indoctrinated, and they are manipulating. They infiltrated, then they indoctrinated those within the university systems, the academia, and today they continue their manipulation now into probably the fourth generation of quantum scientists. They are continuing to manipulate. And this is why I've shared with you, you have quantum scientists, quantum physicists, theoretical and experimental, who are shown, and this is on YouTube, so you can see these, their news footage, quantum scientists being shown the explanation of the mechanics of the universe from the Kabbalists' perspective, from the Talmudic perspective, from the Kabbalist writings, from the rabbis like Schneerson, explaining the mechanics of the universe. And to the astonishment of the scientists, they say, well, that confirms all of our quantum mechanical theories and experiments. It's amazing that you have ancient writings dating back to 3,500 years ago that absolutely confirm what we're doing scientifically today. And yet they are so stuck in their scientific paradigm, so compartmentalized in their thinking, the scientists, they don't realize that the evidence presented to them about quantum mechanics is the evidence of infiltration, indoctrination, and manipulation of academia. The end result being that the paradigm of the quantum mechanics itself is not something that scientists produced on their own through theories and experimentation. It's been fed to them since 1840 by the Kabbalists. And what came out of quantum mechanics? Quantum computing. So therefore, the Kabbalists in power in Israel, no doubt, are using D-Wave quantum computers. I rest my case.
It has been the accepted form of logic to them. This is their logic. Quantum computing is their logic in interpreting the unseen world. And, you know, they don't want to give any credence to heaven or hell. So Satan keeps himself even outside the understanding of those who are secular.
Mm-hmm.
Because not every quantum physicist and Harvard professor or MIT, PhD is necessarily a believer in Satan.
No.
They don't realize it, but they too have been passed down lies.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Bible tells us
it's all
that
lies. It's all lies.
Yeah, the Bible tells us that, you know, we have learned, you know, lies have been passed down to us from our fathers, you know, and the same thing is true with them. They are believing in a system that basically studies the unseen realm, and they can't even detect it. They just know that it exists because of the energy, you know, and
energy signatures.
Yeah, but they can't pinpoint it, and they can never point to it and say, oh, it's right there, or oh, it's there. It's like when God talks about the wind, you know, you never know which way it's coming or which way it's going, but yet in that moment you can feel it.
Right.
You know, and so, but yet you can detect wind patterns with some of the technology that we have today, you know. But when you're talking about the realm of particles, because they began with God in spirit, you know, the unveiling of it is definitely Satan's work in this sense. He wants to try and expose and say to the world that the things of God can be understood and fathomed and figured out. And yet our God tells us, you know, that who knows the mind of God, or who can predict? I think the Bible even uses that word. Who can predict what he's going to do?
That's right.
You know, so only Satan would be so hubristic to think that he can make God's creation of the world understood in such a way that we've got this figured out.
That it's an absolute.
That's right. You know, but he can't predict God's grace, his mercy,
His timing.
That arsenal right there of grace and mercy is enough to submerge him.
Yep.
Because that's totally unpredictable.
Yep.
It is God's right as God to extend mercy and grace and favor to whom he will. And the gates of hell cannot prevail against it. So this whole unveiling of, you know, with CERN and their program, you have to see it for what it is, and it's a weapon system. But it's a system that Satan is causing men to believe in from all over the world and to unite in this project, or multiple projects, if you will. Because he's convinced them that they can destroy or change or alter in some way the energy signatures.
Or discover the source of everything.
Yeah.
And they can't.
And so he's trying to convince them that with this all-powerful machine, that once they just keep with it, and once we discover how these particles are going to move, we can control the world and the universe. Well, you know, that's a nice thought, but it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
So let me kind of wrap up the quantum discussion this way, scientifically. And again, it's simple, but scientifically. And I know I'm going past the 30 minutes. Oh, well. We'll finish at 10 o'clock Eastern here. We've got about 10 minutes. Remember that quantum mechanics is based on probabilities. Let's drill down. What are we talking about when we talk about probabilities or pseudo-random number generation? What are we talking about? The electron. Quantum mechanics is based entirely upon the focus on the electron. Yes, we can say the photon because Einstein originally came up with the quanta in terms of the electrodynamics of light regarding the photon. But I want to keep this simple and understandable. What quantum mechanics mathematically has been trying to do, and this includes CERN, this includes D-Wave, is to pinpoint the location of an electron at any given moment in time, down to a picosecond, P-I-C-O, a picosecond, okay? The point here is an electron is always moving. And I know I'm being repetitive. I've said this for years with you guys. But because the electron has momentum, has angular momentum, and it isn't just as in the diagrams and animations, a nice easy orbit going around and going around the nucleus. That's not it. The more accurate representation of an electron, which is actually multiple electrons, is a cloud. A cloud of electrons that are all moving in random orbits. Random orbits. But the most important thing is that the electron is always in motion. Down to the finest slice of time that man has come up with, and that's the Planck scale of time, even smaller than a picosecond. The Planck scale of time, you cannot establish the exact location even down to a Planck second. because just as you try to pinpoint its location, it moves on. Therefore, all that quantum mechanics and its elaborate mathematics is able to do is to provide an approximation of the location of an electron at an approximate time. Because there is no finite moment in time. Time is always moving, just like the electron is always moving. You cannot arrest the movement of time. You cannot arrest the movement of an electron. Therefore, it's always best to guess in quantum mechanics. You look it up. The simplest explanations of quantum mechanics will always say it's based on probabilities, randomness. And why does quantum mechanics speak this way? Because it is the Kabbalists' explanation, not God's. God deals in absolutes. But it is the Kabbalist explanation. It's the best guess of Satan. Any quantum physicist worth his or her salt, when posed the question, are there any absolutes in quantum mechanics? And if they're honest with you, they'll say no, because it's based on probabilities. And yet you will have these people trotted out by the media, most of them with the title theoretical, and they will speak in absolutes to you and say, we know, and we know, and we know. Our experiments prove, and this experiment proves. No, because you can take any scientific experiment, I don't care what discipline it is, and you can drill down to the finest point, and it will always come back to quantum mechanics and the electron. Any scientific discipline and any mathematical theory will always come back to that electron, because that notion originated from the Kabbalists, who infiltrated, indoctrinated, and continue the manipulation of the thinking of the academics. Okay?
I would venture to say that many of these theoretical physicists, scientists, technologists, even basic programmers have more questions than answers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they find it frustrating. Do I want to spend all of my life trying to figure out what this algorithm means, or, putting together these formulas that only lead to more questions and to more questions and to more questions. I think they think the more questions they have unanswered, the more intelligent they are, because if they can't figure it out, nobody else can figure it out, and at least they can be credited with discovering something that nobody can figure out.
And
who comes up with the best questions? Who comes up with the best question that nobody can answer? Even better.
They laugh all the way to the bank collecting their paychecks.
Well, they're collecting their funds from these, organizations that are funding people just for the sake of keeping the theory alive.
Yep.
And that's what it's all about. They control the purse strings, and they have all these grants for studies, but the fact is you keep studying and studying, but you don't come up with any answers.
Yep. Again,
it's what's good enough.
Yep.
And acceptable in this day and age. But yeah, technology, we've had as a world and culture or people, humanity has experienced many types of revolutions. The Industrial Revolution, we are now in the technological revolution, which is the last. It's the last revolution that we'll have.
Yep, it is.
And it, but we know it and see it for what it is And if people come out of this with nothing else, we hope that we have made it clear to them that at the foundation for technology is based on a system of ancient divination. As Solomon said, nothing new under the sun. It has just evolved. It's just the same divination that has evolved into what is now our acceptable technological age.
That is true.
And so, I think that's, if we recognize that, we just have to comfort ourselves with the fact and the gratefulness that God has given us to be able to see it, and then say, okay, how do we operate within this system? Which leads me to what I wanted to say to people before we end, if we're pretty much wrapping this up now, because we've gone later and I'm exhausted.
Yep.
I would suggest this, and you can all take it for what it's worth, but we have talked about many times every day now especially, making sure that you put on the full armor of God, because it is a spiritual act of worship and defense, and it arms you as a soldier for Christ and not a volunteer. You're not putting on a t-shirt that says, I'm for this. You are putting on armor to defend yourself against technology, powers that are unseen, that traverse our atmosphere and our world and the air. But what we need to do is, when you pick up your phone, and I know that this is going to sound crazy to some people, but when you open your laptop or you pick up your phone, the first words that should be out of your mouth are, Lord, would you please protect me? And you issue a decree to the satanic realm, and you tell them, you will not use my input on this device for your prognostications. That's what you need to pray. You need to take that phone in hand every day when you get up and you turn it on and you say, Lord, I'm only using this for the purpose that I use it for, in terms of making a phone call or getting an Uber or whatever it is that you do. But pray over that device that you are using it with an honest and a sincere mode. You're not looking at it as a divinatory device, but Satan on the back end, that black mirror, if you will, that other side of technology, is taking your inputs as dots and dashes, the same as geomancy, the poking in the sand, the tapping on the silicate, a hardened form of sand, and taking your input and using it to add to his data that he will then use against you in terms of the prognostications. So when you pick up your phone or you go to use your computer, just say a prayer and command and tell Satan, you will not use my fingerprints, my interaction with these devices for the purpose of prognostication. I command you to not use that in the name of Jesus. And it doesn't have to be anything flamboyant. You are just telling the satanic realm that you are utilizing this technology because it's what you have to use in your job or in our world today. But he is not to use it for his purposes. And so long as you direct him that he is not allowed to do that, he cannot do that. But it's the unknowing world that doesn't recognize this as a spiritual battle or a spiritual infiltration, if you will, into the minds and hearts of Christians, that he's using that device against them. So use it, yes, but with stipulations. You will put forth the mandate on how your data will be used, and it won't be used by Satan for his own purposes. So that's just my 2 cents.
Your 3 cents.
3 cents.
Okay, I'm going to leave you with a word to look up. Heuristic. 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 Ancient Greek, to find or discover, or a heuristic for short, in any approach to problem solving or self-discovery that employs a practical method that is not guaranteed to be optimal, perfect, or rational, but which is nevertheless sufficient for reaching an immediate, short-term goal. Where finding an optimal solution is impossible or impractical, heuristic methods can be used to speed up the process of finding a satisfactory solution. Heuristics can be mental shortcuts that ease the cognitive load of making a decision. Examples that employ heuristics include using trial and error, a rule of thumb, an educated guess, an intuitive judgment, a guesstimate, profiling, or common sense. Now, why am I reading this to you and asking you to pay attention to it? Because just like combinatorial optimization, as the operating system, as I've called it, of the D-Wave quantum computers, the essence in the discussion of the electron flowing through the qubit chipset in opposite directions simultaneously, producing superposition of 0 and 1 because of the opposite simultaneous movement of electrons through the superconducting circuits of the qubit. The system of combinatorial optimization is a heuristic system. And anytime you get into and reading the papers, the white papers that come out of D-Wave, you will see heuristic front and center. Because as I read in that definition, that description of best guesses, the reason for their acceptance of the good enough solution in the heuristic philosophy, methodology, is that it results in a good enough solution that is arrived at in a very short period of time. Because in all computing, the time it takes to compute is the most critical. So to shorten down the computing time, the processing time, rather than trying to find an absolute, a finite solution, they take a good enough solution that they can arrive at in a much shorter time frame. They're cheating. Do you think in your algebra class, your trigonometry class, your geometry class, you could have ever gotten away with saying to your professor, my answer's good enough, I should get an A. But this is what D-Wave does, and they sell these machines at $15 million a piece. And the new one coming in June is composed of more than 5,000 qubits. I think it's 567, 5,000. Trying to remember, I should have it in front of me, but I'm going to cut this off short here. I think it's 5,687, I think is the number I remember. Don't hold me to it. But it's well over 5,000 qubits. I don't know what the price tag's going to be for that one, maybe 20 million. But they're getting the intelligence agencies and laboratories, nuclear weapons research facilities, Oak Ridge, Tennessee, Los Alamos, etc., to buy these things and to buy computer time through their cloud program. And all they're getting for their money are good enough answers. They got them fast, and they figure it's good enough. Why? Because that electron keeps moving, and pinpointing its location is only a good enough guess, but it's good enough for man, and they'll move on. And with that, I'd like to say thank you for staying with us for 3 hours. Please send us your prayer requests. We're honored by them. We thank you for your friendship and your fellowship. And Lord willing, we will be back together on Wednesday. Thank you and good night.